the document called the Triennial Agreement, process and adoption. Essentially, early on in each triennial period of the council, there's a triennial agreement that's adopted by all 5 Hawke's Bay councils, and the current version is attached. What this paper does is simply looks to set up a process whereby the chair and other parties meet to discuss the current shape, whether there are any substantive new activities that might be contemplated in the triennial period, for example by the regional council or by others, where, for example, in the case of TLAs, they may have activities that transition across their own district into other districts. So it's really meant to be a framework for having a local government discussion, in principle politically led, but I guess supported by staff. So that's this paper simply looks to get that process moving, okay, with a view to, from memory, adopting it by the end of March.
Just this is the actual agreement here, which I've read.
Yep.
So we have that meeting, I think, every 3 months with the chair and the other mayors. Does this link into that?
Chairman, it's really a separate issue. It's a specific initiative that you that needs to be dealt with and finalised. But what I would say is that thereafter it may be that for example, the mayoral forum, which you're referring to, I think, becomes an instrument of the triennial agreement for the activities. So they're not unrelated.
Okay, there are questions. Like, lift my head in the air. Paul, and then you, Rick.
Yeah, just a very quick question through the chair. Is the Regional Planning Committee going to upset that process around the point 8, the consultation in relation to regional policy statement at all? I mean, because that process has changed slightly from our point of view, does this document fit in with that? Okay.
Oh, probably a very good question actually. Councillor Bailey, I'll need to double check that, but I can't see why it would, in the sense that we've had the RPC now operating for over 3 years, I think, actually. So it would have existed. It would have been operating in its particular statutory responsibilities in place, obviously, for a period in the previous triennium. So I don't think it's a substantive issue is the answer, but it's a fair point of detail. Yep.
If I might just respond to that in brief, the RPC is a subcommittee of the council, so it's a council thing. So this is between councils. This is not, the RPC wouldn't be able to enter into an agreement or arrangement with others in its own right.
No,
So,
it's got to, yes,
with me?
Yep.
So it's not a separate entity from this, it's a subset of the council, so I think we've dealt with on that. The thing that I'd say to you is more of if you read this paper here, Andrew, the thing, when you've read it, it tells you, if you read just the bare paper, it tells you nothing. I thought this was almost Kafkaesque, in that I had to go and read all the documentation at the back, and I felt that this was this shows a writing style which I think we're a bit weak on here, that the report should say exactly what it is. See, the reason for the report is according to the LGA section 15, that tells us nothing, required to adopt a triennial agreement. What's that about? You with me? I think it could have said this is, triennial agreement for this purpose with these for these reasons. So then when you read the report, it makes sense.
Yep.
It doesn't tell you that. You've got to read all the way to the back and get to the report before you figure out what it's all about. So it's very helpful in the first paragraph to tell us exactly what is the mischief here, what we're trying to solve, what we're trying to get to. But I read the report and thought, wow.
But you don't have anything fundamentally against it.
No, I do. I agree with that. But you should have told me what I was agreeing to.
It was probably in defence. I think the author wrote it just as she was trying to go on leave.
So I've got a question for you as well, Andrew. Just thinking about the activities of the Joint Hazards Committee and the likely recommendation that will come back to the 3 councils as a consequence of the consultation with the panels. Is everyone getting a double echo?
Mike's too high. need
down
the
there.
volume on, the gain on your mic is too strong.
Oh.
Getting feedback.
Okay. There's been no discussion between the three constituent councils as to how any recommendations that come back are going to be funded. Can you tell me how that fits in with this document, or does it not?
To be fair, it hasn't traditionally done so. But what I would say, Councillor, is that you raise a really good point, because at the end of the day, a substantial expenditure by three councils in relation to coastal hazards, etc., needs some pretty serious attention from all, or at least a minimum of those three councils, and should be a matter of substance. It could easily be a matter of substance described under this agreement and the schedule. So I would, perhaps as a process point, what I'd suggest is that if those sorts of questions in relation to items of substance can be itemised and identified by councillors to Liz and me, we'll make sure that they get on the agenda for the process. Okay, but it is a really good point. I mean, look, frankly, if I'm really upfront about it, the Triennial Agreement's been a classic case of a bit like an MOU, written, drafted, signed, in the office drawer. Yeah, that's the truth of it. Whereas I think your point's absolutely valid. Yep.
Mr. Chair, I wonder whether it is time, picking up on that very last point, to send some meaningful dialogue to the other local authorities, and I'm proposing for consideration the addition of a principle at paragraph 5 or section 5 of the agreement, adding a principle to this effect, that the signatories of the agreement acknowledge that local authorities are required to meet their obligations in relation to any resource consent issued as a principle of the arrangements between councils. So it's a very current issue for the local authorities, and we ought to be raising it with them. So that in principle. But going further, Mr. Chair, under 6, general approach to communication and coordination, I'm suggesting we propose to local authorities the establishment of resource consent management committees with each of the local authorities, and on a regular basis, perhaps every 3 months, we consider the resource consents issued not only to those authorities, but the consents issued within those local authority boundaries, so that we've got a completely joined up relationship between this council and the local authorities. So at governance level and at staff level, we do have a very clear pathway for consents, and it's no more poignantly brought into play with the Havelock North water scenario, that we need to be all over these consents from top to bottom. So I'm proposing that we in fact make the document live, and we include meaningful clauses and provisions that send a signal to councils, but also provide a mechanism to collaborate, particularly on the pointy end of this, which are those consents.
Mr. Chairman, would that proposal include both notified and non-notified consents?
Well, I'm thinking, Mr. Chair, that the consents right across the board, the discussion generally about consents, which our regional resource management plan talks about, but we don't have any mechanism to implement. So whether it's notified or non-notified, it could be generic. It could be both. It could be one or other of the above.
James, do you have any comment on that? Are you the
It's odd. It's a combination of James and Ian.
James and Ian?
I think it's probably a sensible idea, and I think perhaps the value in this approach would not only be increasing your situational awareness of what they're doing and what their obligations are, but perhaps also for the governance within the TAs to understand what activities they have at play and what obligations they have.
It makes it real, doesn't it?
Sure does.
I suggest, Mr Chair, we do add it in, and obviously the document needs to go to the local authorities for consideration.
Yep.
And they can either like it or take it out. Just an idea.
Yeah, could we just draft something
Yeah, we can draft that.
as a,
Yep.
otherwise it just goes in the wild distance.
Oh, thank you, Chair. The other one, following on the same theme, and I totally support the two suggestions made, but I just note that Horizons Regional Council have a annual get-together with all the councils. All the councillors, they spend half a day, get to know each other a bit better, chuck some current themes on the table. I'm not sure where that needs to go in here, but it wouldn't be silly. I mean, and number 6, for example, you could put it as a new 2, perhaps, I don't know. It's worth exploring anyway.
It is, we tried it once, and there's so many of us that it sort of became a rabble, didn't it,
We had,
in Napier?
we did have a tour to the dam site where all the councils came,
All the councillors came.
which was good. That was 4 years ago, whatever. But I'm just putting it out there, Chair.
Can I just respond to that? I think the suggestion by Councillor Wilson is a good one, but I don't think we need it in a document such as this. I think the chairs and the mayors and chair and CEs meet from time to time. It could be an issue you put on the agenda for, is there an appropriate time or place for us to have a meeting, and if there's an agenda is worthwhile. So I wouldn't want to have a meeting for no particular purpose, but if there was an issue came up and you thought it was worthwhile, well then, call the meeting and we'll all turn up. I think that's the place for it.
I can discuss it with them. Only been to one of those and it wasn't that great. I mean the big meeting. Okay, are there any, sorry, do you have, I did tell them as well, yeah, you did right. Okay, if there's no other discussion on that, do we have someone to move the recommendations 1 and 2 essentially? Do we have a mover? Councillor Wilson, seconder? Councillor Tipp. Yeah, yes. Oh, yeah. Actually, the recommendation. Maybe we should make that a forced recommendation, Neil. And if you could make a sentence up just on your point, because it is an action point.
Happy to include that as mover.
Yeah. You'll have to draft it. That's all.
Well, I think look, for the sake of ease, we will draft.
Yeah.
Between Leanne and I, we will draft.
Okay, right.
If you don't mind, if you're happy to trust us, we'll draft and make sure it's in the meetings.
We would always trust you
The
guys.
meeting minutes for you to ratify next meeting, right? You okay with that?
And the mover-
And I will note Councillor Bevan's issue as well.
Yes. Okay. Right. We have movement and seconder. All those in favour, including the number 4. It's unknown. Aye. None against. It's carried. So we have item 9, local government statement.
Mr.
Boy, we've
Chairman,
got some big ones today. We've got some goodies today.
Mr. Chairman, this is required by statute. It's a
Yes, it is, yeah.
straightforward document.
It is.
For the sake of time, I'm prepared to move the recommendation.
I think it's very sensible. We'll move it. Do you?
Just changing recommendation. 3, recommendation 3 that, this is item 9, isn't it? Yep.
Yeah.
That nevertheless, council will undertake a community consultation process on the proposed consultation process with feedback due by the 3rd of March.
On the local government statement.
Is it the local government
Yeah,
statement?
item 9 we're talking, councillor. Don't think that,
Yep,
yeah?
the local governance,
Yeah, but he's going into the actual.
the actual document.
Oh, you've got into the actual document.
Yeah,
So where are you in the actual document?
Oh, in the actual document, well, this is page 17 and 18 of the local governance statement.
What the hell is that?
And on page 18, under significant, the first, second, third, fourth paragraph, as part of the engagement process for the adoption of this policy and subsequent reviews, which is what this particular item is, Council will ask people in the region their engagement preferences and will review those preferences each 3-year term.
It's the engagement and significance policy. It's not
So what's the amendment?
What's the amendment?
But the amendment is we actually go and do that because the proposal is before us is that we just roll that particular document over.
With your permission, I'll get Leanne to comment on that.
So the that statement is directly from the significance and engagement strategy or policy, which was consulted on when it was developed and then adopted. That's not actually in relation to the governance statement, which is simply a legislative requirement.
Sorry, can you? I'm a little bit confused.
Don't need it.
So what's in the actual governance statement is just a reiteration of the significance and engagement policy, which was developed last council term. I can't remember exactly the date, and adopted after consultation with the public. So that is referenced specifically to the significance and engagement policy, not to the governance statement itself.
So that's an
Sorry,
attachment. It's an essentially attachment to that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's clarified that for me.
Thank
No,
you
that's
very
all right.
much.
I withdraw that amendment.
Thank you. We have a mover. Do we have a seconder? Come on, wake up. Second, Councillor Bevan. All those in favour of adopting that? Aye. All those against?
Could I just make one brief comment? Because you just went straight at it, but the point I want to make is that what Councillor Bailey raised is a point of why I was going to talk about the last one. With these papers, there should be a clear statement at the beginning of it. What is the purpose of this and what it's to do? And this is missing from this paper also. So I thought if we had that clear, then Paul would have got it a bit clearer. So we're talking about making a statement under local governments, etc., etc. But that doesn't explain it. You with me? That's my view. It doesn't explain it. So you need to have something which explains it. So when someone reads it, they say, I get that. Just to make reference to the act and reference to the other is not an explanation. That's my point. So just asking for the papers to be clearer in an explanatory way.
A simple explanation,
Yeah.
executive summary in the front. We probably should do that. Okay, we moved that. All those, anyone against?
No.
No. Then those motions are carried.
Can you remind me who seconded?
Oh, who seconded that? Yeah, Peter Evan did. Right, item 10, RWSS Moratorium. I think that's you, James, is it?
Thank you, Chair. Relatively self-explanatory, I think. The
Nothing
review
is
process
today,
is
mate.
well and truly underway, and we're on track at this point in time for reporting back to Council as intended by the 26th of April. Last week I was contacted by the Chief Executive of HBRC, who expressed a view that the board of HBRC was concerned that the resolutions in respect of moratorium passed at the end of last year did not include any time limits, so were effectively an indefinite moratorium, and on that basis they did not feel comfortable agreeing to it as such an open-ended moratorium would be in conflict with their duties to act in the best interests of the company. They had formed the view that a time-limited moratorium undertaken for the purposes of the review was something that could be consistent with their fiduciary duties, and so we're comfortable just as long as the council resolved to put a time limit on that moratorium period, and so they sought this paper which is now before you today. I do note that at the conclusion of the review, once you're in receipt of the review findings, you could at that point in time engage the directors in a discussion about extending that moratorium further if further time was required to consider further matters or what have you. But certainly I'm working on the basis that the review will give you the necessary information on which to base a decision in a timely manner as to whether or not you think the scheme should proceed or not. And so we have suggested in the paper that the moratorium extend for approximately 1 month after the conclusion of the review, and that would give you time to consider it, make any necessary decisions, and that aligns with your council meeting on the 31st of May.
Thank you, James. Now, if we could just keep on questions, to James first, and then we'll go to comment after, just get some structure into this. So 1, 2, 3.
I don't have a question.
You don't have a question? Could you
No, I'll
hold
move
it?
the motion.
There are questions.
My question is simply, could you just remind us what the court date is? The
What
court date?
It's the last week of February, as I understand.
27th, 28th of February.
I'll just make the comment that I think it's unlikely that there will be a decision out of the Supreme Court within 3 months of those hearings, and there has been in the past decisions by the Supreme Court that have taken in the order of 9 to 12 months following the hearing. They've clearly granted some urgency with respect to holding the hearings, so it does seem that the court understands that there is a need to make a decision expeditiously, but my personal view is that getting a decision out of them within 3 months is unlikely, but that remains to be seen.
Fenton?
Oh, you may have answered, through you, Chair, I think you may have answered my question. HBRC, they're comfortable with this date? Is that what?
Correct.
So it doesn't...
The chief executive of HBRC has advised me of that case. I can't speak on behalf of the board.
The chairman indicated that is somewhat uncomfortable with it, particularly given that border contracts due to expire on 30th of June. Is that right?
So can I clarify that the resolution passed by this council at the end of last year enabled the ongoing recontracting of existing water user agreements to maintain the value of the assets. So that issue was explicitly canvassed and is outside of the scope of the moratorium. What I can also advise is that the 2 emails that I received from the Chief Executive of HBRC in relation to this matter last week were copied to the interim chairman.
Just should the Supreme Court come back before the 31st of March, could there be a provision in this recommendation to revisit the earlier date, either the 31st of March or the the findings from the Supreme Court?
Councillor, can I suggest that's entirely within your gift as councillors to direct us in that regard. If you'd like the report back to come sooner, then you can issue that instruction. I would say, though, that obviously we have
The moratorium.
Well, yes. I guess the issue is that you're not in a position to make a decision about the scheme until the review's completed. Based on the advice I provided you at the end of last year, have some concerns about bringing the date of the review forward at all, just based on the complexity and scale of the work that we have underway. In the event that the Supreme Court made a decision, and let's say for argument's sake, towards the end of March, and there was some clarity around the legal issues on the land swap, then we would certainly at that point in time look to see how we could expedite the tail end of the review process and bring it back to this table as fast as we can. But that will all depend on a range of contractors and consultants and various people that are working on the review and their ability to complete that work. But look, I think that's a highly unlikely scenario based on past form by the Supreme Court.
I just wonder if we could put all the earlier, if we can make provision there somehow, Chair. I'm not sure what the wording could be, but should the scenario come up that it's earlier, then we're covered off.
The point he's making he is that they can't get all the information through by that timetable anyway. So even if the court somehow does rule earlier, which is most unlikely, the review wouldn't have been completed anyway. Is that the point you're making?
I think, James, the point you're making is that if that issue materialises that you're raising, then there's plenty of room to to bring back a position to the council for a council debate at that time. That's the way you're answering it, James.
And given the low probability of it, my advice to you would be to deal with that issue if and when it arises.
Councillor Balfour.
Well, I was just going to say, we traversed the issue of what reasonable time was required to do the extent of work that needs to be done here for a credible review to be undertaken, and I see no reason to re-litigate the issue here.
Any more questions? If not, do I have another question? A question? A mover? A seconder? Do we have a seconder? We have a seconder. Now, do you want us to speak to this? Wish to speak? Anyone else wish to speak to this? All those in favour? Aye. Against? No. Against? And against? Division. Why not? We're going to have division here. All those in favour? Got them? Well, get them. Against? Wairua and Waipakarau, eh? Aye, crikey. The W's. They do it to us. Okay, thank you very much. It's moved. We'll move to item 11. I just put on